Nuanced Nonsense is back.
Yeah, we're back from a long hiatus.
Yeah, the last time we released an episode was 2021, but in reality, we recorded that in like 2020.
Yeah, like part of all of this was sorry to all of our guests that we kind of shafted. We had you waste your time and come on and record some nonsense with us multiple times, and then we never released your episode. We're very sorry, but we're just very lazy people, so I don't think we're going to push that out.
Yeah, I think it's been 5 years, 4 or 5 years. Like, you've changed as people, we've changed as people. Like, it's honestly not really worth going back to release the episode. But honestly, I haven't really heard from any of y'all about releasing the episode, so y'all might not even care.
Yeah, we'll pretend like it didn't happen. It'll be our happy little secret. But we've returned for many years because I've been sprung on the inspiration to resume our podcast. Part of it is I am now in medical school, about to apply for residency applications. And part of that is I'm slowly starting to realize that residencies are looking for someone that they can vibe with and chill with because they know they're going to be working with you for at least 3 years, if not 4 or more. And so a lot of residents are telling me they tend to ask you more about hobbies than any of your qualifications. And the end result is I want to have this podcast so I can talk about it. I used it to get into med school, and I was like, wait, this really does help me, 1, communicate better, and 2, just show my humanity,
Okay, I didn't realize we're getting this meta about the podcast. so residents or like medical schools, they're okay with you being forthright about what your motivations are in terms of like starting the podcast and potentially listening to it.
Yeah, they're aware, but they also know that you're not gonna. There might be an ulterior motive. In my sense, in my head, I guess, me and Alex started this podcast because I just wanted to talk. And that's still the primary reason for this, but the residency thing kind of like sprung that fire on our ass. Because me and Alex have been talking about restarting this podcast for years. Every single like half year, we're like, what if we restarted it? And it's like we have all of the blueprint to do this because we've done it before. We know how to do it. We just need to put the training wheels back on and start talking.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I was just wondering if we were, because going into this podcast, I was like, yeah, we're just, we just miraculously sprung back. But yeah, it's always good to be honest, I suppose.
Yeah, I think another thing about, we've prepared a small list of bulletin points to talk about, because another thing that our podcast used to run off of was pure just energy. We just let it go, and we saw what happened. We talk about literally whatever was on the person's mind at the time or on our mind, but we were trying to experiment with scripting ourselves a tiny bit, trying to focus it in a little more and see what happens. And so the first thing that we have for the docket today is how our lives have been and changed since the last pod. And for me, I've been in med school. To get the long story short, yes, it's hard. It's not as bad as people seem. You can have fun in medical school. Have friends that are not in medicine, so you're not completely surrounded by medicine. It's honestly a great time. It's a lot of hard work, but it's not to the point where you're suffering day in, day out. You can't have a life. It's definitely possible. But that's been me.
Did you have those expectations going into medical school that you basically wouldn't have a life for the next 4 years? Or that was like those, kind of 4 things you mentioned, like those are things that you wanted to kind of overcome or counteract?
Yeah, so going into medical school, some of our good friends of the show, we want to have them on someday. When we met them, they were already like 1st, 2nd, 3rd years in medical school, and they were having the time of their lives while in medical school and doing all these various rigorous things of medicine. And so that heavily influenced me going in, and I was thinking, okay, I definitely can attempt to recreate that. I don't know if I can fully recreate that because this is also a personality thing, right? If you're a homebody, you're a homebody. That's the end of the story, right? But I wanted to, live life a little, enjoy beyond just medicine is my life. And recently, I did a rotation in PM&R, which is physical medicine and rehabilitation, a specialty I'm interested in. And one of the doctors was telling me that our generation of medicine is just different. The culture is different. She was like telling us that doctors, when she was a med student, and doctors before then, they lived and breathed medicine. That was their entire identity, was being a doctor. But a lot of people that are going into medicine nowadays want to have a strict boundary between those things. And, it manifests in people talking about work-life balance. And I personally believe in that, but I can see where the threads shift, right? Because now you don't have doctors advocating as much because you don't invest into the whole culture of medicine nearly as much. Young doctors just want to clock in, clock out, which is not the worst. Like you're not obligated to do that, but it creates a huge cultural shock almost in medicine. And so to get back to the original point, I think that's, fallen off onto me and our good friends, is that I care a lot about my life outside of med school, outside of medicine. And so that's definitely influenced me the most of my med school journey. This might not be ubiquitously true, but it's definitely mine. I guess the motto it boils down to is work hard, play hard.
Nice. You have 2 years left, or 1 year left of medical school.
Yeah, I'm about to be a fourth year medical student, and that's about the time that you apply to residency. And so big stressful times coming up. It's a big kind of like med school milestone. Yeah.
Okay, so you've had 3 years to kind of explore, figure out the best work-life balance in terms of being a student and, having fun outside of that.
Yeah, definitely for anyone that's interested in medicine, the hardest part about medical school is one, getting in, and two, adapting to one, the study life, and two, how you want to manage your life. Because it's a very difficult transition in the sense that the amount of content that's being shoved into you, no matter what med school you go to, is enormous. And so learning how to juggle that in your own life is what everyone struggles with. And that's definitely the hardest thing to do within medicine, especially if you aspire to do these great things like, ophthalmology or orthopedic surgery that require pretty intense med student, resume background, all that stuff. You have to really manage your time well, and you don't, hit the ground running being number one champion of time management, right? You got to build up these skills. And if you don't find your friends or any support network going into medical school, this transition becomes exponentially harder. So that's, anyone who's interested, know that will probably be your biggest and first hurdle.
Yeah, so it's not just about, I guess kind of the hard qualifications or of like med school itself, but kind of also like, what's your support group? Like what are the little things like outside of medical school to help just ease your life overall?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that medicine is changing in the sense that the type of applicant is changing as well. And so the applicants year over year are becoming more competitive. And so what ends up happening is medical school becomes harder and harder to get into, even though the government and all these other organizations are trying to open up more med school spots. It doesn't match the desire. And I always feel for people that are super interested in medicine but can't reach like the scores, just can't get an interview for whatever reason. Like you're getting blocked out without a chance to show yourself. And I feel a lot for those people. But when you're sifting through thousands of applicants, there is an element of luck involved, which really sucks.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's kind of similar to like just, white collar, like corporate work too, right? Like, you're applying to ton of jobs when you're trying to get your first job, and sometimes like you don't really know why they rejected you, right? So kind of not so subtle segue into how my life has been.
Yeah, please tell us more.
So I think when I just started my career as a software engineer. I'm still a software engineer, but yeah, I'm on my third job now. So started at Citi, and I went to Capital One, and now I'm at Chase. So yeah, I mean, things have been all right. I think I've always had kind of like, I'm not like super passionate about my work, but I think it's something that I can see myself doing like long term. So I think for some people, like, work is like their calling, and that's kind of what their identity revolves around. But I think that's not so much the case for me. But what I've really learned is kind of how to manage that, like put in the right amount of effort and respect like, because obviously this is something like I'm going to be spending majority of my life doing, like it's majority of my day, which is majority of my week, while also not having it like kind of take over like my 5 to 9, basically.
Yeah, I think it's good to have that boundary. I touched on it briefly earlier, but to backtrack a little bit, for anyone who's interested in getting into software engineering, what did you do to get into that field?
Yeah, so I mean, I had a more traditional route where I went to college, right? I studied computer science. I looked for internships, and then, using that internship, as like my experience as a college student, I was able to, land a job out of college. So, I mean, I know right now, the market hasn't been great for software engineers. So, in the past, people, would go to boot camps, or maybe they would try to work on some personal projects, and that's how they could get their jobs or their first job. But yeah, I think right now people really want accreditation. So yeah, it may not be a popular opinion, but yeah, if you really want to get into software engineering, I probably would consider, maybe going back to school and getting a degree. Yeah, because as of right now, like I think, employers are looking for a reason like why they should hire you, and that's kind of like the baseline of what they're looking for now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of these recruiting, investment banking, finance videos on TikTok. How important is networking in your field? And did it matter? How important are these internships? Like, what are the tips and the tricks from the pro?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I guess I literally am a pro. I feel like pro contains like connotations that I'm not comfortable with. But, yeah, networking is pretty important in software engineering. Believe it or not, I think a lot of people's image of software engineers is like, we're like code monkeys, and we just hunch over in our chair on the keyboard, and we type away for like 8-10 hours a day, and we get stuff done somehow. Or you think we're like the opposite, where you watch like that day in the life video of like, this is my life as a software engineer, and it's like some person making coffee for like 5 hours and going to like a meeting like once. But I think a big thing in any field, not just computer science, software engineering, is you have to like market yourself. You have to, because there's probably like a lot of people on your team, and at the end of the day, like, what you're doing the best, right? Like your manager, your coworkers, unless they're like working really close with you, they don't have time to know exactly what you're doing all the time, right? So you gotta communicate what you're doing in like a succinct way that still captures the right amount of depth of what you're doing. And I think like that soft skill is something like I kind of knew on paper, like in college, like graduating, that's something needed, but I think that's something I didn't fully understand until like my second job, where I realized that it's not just about doing your job, right? Like you kind of have to go quote unquote above and beyond in some ways, where whether that be communication, making presentations, or looking for stuff like outside of your daily tasks to do, whether it's something that's I mean, in the software engineering case, like you're automating like some tests for your team so that it can speed up the deployment process, or you're thinking about the products and like what are some more features we can add on, instead of just waiting for your product manager to come up with a assignment for you to do. I think like just the biggest takeaway is that it's not exactly networking, but it's like a lot of soft skills like really matter in a technical field, and I think that applies in any job, right? But I think the biggest thing for networking too is, as there are more and more people applying to these roles, like the recruiter, it's gonna be hard for the recruiter to trust like what the applicant is saying on their resume, right? So that's why like you gotta talk with the recruiter, or even within your company when you're trying to transfer teams, like you gotta like be on good terms with like your manager, because you never know, or manager your coworker, because you never know what opportunity might come next. So soft skills really do matter.
You brought up earlier like a little bit about going above and beyond in your job. Are you able to do that all in your confines of 9 to 5? Do you stay later? Is that something you find trouble with managing the difference between your 9 to 5 and 5 to 9?
Yeah, I think that's something that's really dependent on each person. Like some people, like they might just be like hyper efficient in what they do, and they probably can do that in their 9 to 5. But like for some people, like that's gonna spill over, right? And I think I see like both sides. Like as a Gen Z, I've seen the older generations, kind of, bust their ass like working like all the time, and they don't really seem fulfilled outside of work. So of course, like my instinct is I want to set boundaries, right? But I think other times it's like, hey, like this company is paying you, right? Like you're not entitled to payment, right? So at the end of the day, like sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, and if that means like you don't have enough time, during the 9 to 5 to like get your stuff done, then sometimes you gotta spend a little extra, right? And then if it takes you 8 hours to do your normal tasks, and sometimes that if you want to figure out ways to push yourself beyond that average standard, then sometimes you might have to spend time after work. But I think it's like one of those things where it can get toxic really quick. So I'm not saying like that's something you have to do, but I think you just got to be aware that in the industry, that might be what they're expecting, right? So it's something that you just gotta accept. If that's something you're comfortable with doing or something you're not.
Especially with the current job market economic situation, I've heard from not only Alex but many other friends in many different fields that finding a job is tough. And I mean, it's always been kind of tough just because getting experience when something requires experience feels like a lose-lose situation, right? Yeah. And so do you feel like in these situations nowadays, it's almost like a hidden necessity that you put in this extra work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so in that, like anything, like everything counts, right? Like anything helps. Like when you're in interviews or, they're asking you like, why should I hire you over, the thousands of applicants or the hundreds of applicants that have applied. So, yeah, I think in some ways, like, you want to seem genuine. Like, you don't, like, if they can tell you're doing stuff just to get the job, like, it may not be a negative, but it's not going to be a positive either, right? Like, it's just like a neutral contribution. So, yeah. I don't know if it exactly answers your question, but I would say, like, going above and beyond kind of just, is kind of subjective, but yeah, I think if it's like something genuine that you're doing, like, for example, like, actually like helping the team, making the process easier, and it's not something that is like low effort, then, yeah, they can appreciate that.
Yeah. And going back to what I said earlier, another sort of life update section that we're talking about here on our script is our hobbies, what we've been up to outside of our main kind of time sinks. So, any new hobbies? Have they changed? What you up to?
Yeah, I think during the pandemic we were just inside all day, so I honestly don't even really remember what my hobbies were. Like, I feel like I watched a lot of basketball. Like, I was really, like, I've always been a huge Mavs fan, but I was like really into the Mavs, like that 2020, 2021 season. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, I just watch every game. Like, I literally watched every press conference, like every post-game interview from each of like the main players. Like, I was like hunting down like the YouTube channels that would record these videos, and these videos had like 5 views or something. Like, I was that bored. So yeah, I think that's what I was into. I think I played like the PS4. So basically, whatever hobbies that you can do inside. But since then, yeah, I've like picked up some stuff. I started playing pickleball, like a lot of people have in, the summer of 2023, 2022. I started climbing. I also picked up kind of audio tech. So at my church, I help out with doing like just live mixing for our worship band. So I mean that's been cool. I mean it's kind of relevant to like our podcast too, right? As we're recording, just it's all about how we sound, right? So like EQ and stuff. So those are some things I've picked up.
Yeah. For me, at the time, I was actually working in person at AmeriCorps, which is, if any of the viewers know, Peace Corps or any form of like international, go over to some place, help them out with what they're doing. You're doing pretty random things depending on what you get assigned. I was doing the domestic version of Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, which loaned me out to a separate nonprofit that helped families that suffered from Hurricane Harvey rebuild houses. It was very Habitat for Humanity-esque, just under a different name. And what I ended up doing, because it was COVID, we had no volunteers, I just converted to a construction worker, basically, which I did not regret at all, because now I have all this experience in how to build a house. I see all these random things that are wrong with houses and like buildings and stuff like that. And it's just, I really enjoyed my time, but it really changed my hobbies because I was doing a ton of outdoor stuff and I was just exhausted from working manually. And so my hobbies primarily were just, I'd go home and rot at home, try to watch some anime, but I didn't have the energy to do a ton of things. And my hobbies evolved a lot once I got out of that job, especially as I was gearing up to go to medical school. I decided to just let loose, go on vacations, hang out with friends more, cultivate a big friend group in Dallas, just all of the kind of very social media-esque type things that you see people doing, like, oh, we're going to do this random group hangout at a museum, we're going to play this like laser light game thing, we're going to do this, that, this. And then as my time has progressed forward into post-grad, I got into medical school. Now I have like this big time sink. And now my hobbies stayed the same but changed, because in college, I was a super big sports guy trying to learn like a new sport every single year. Now in med school, I had to find that balance of, I'm sedentary a lot and I want to be active, but how much more should I be sedentary? And so I reconnected with volleyball as my main sort of form of activity. But everything else fell to the wayside. I grew up playing tennis, gone. I grew up playing, a little bit of flag football, gone. Just, it all fell to the wayside. Mostly self-inflicted, really. Because now I'm playing this game of, I have a finite number of hours in my day. I want to watch this anime. But I also, like, the gym is not open 24 hours a day. So it was always playing that in my head. So basically this translates to, I'm playing volleyball now pretty regularly, especially when I'm in New York, and watching a lot of anime. I think I've just been into anime for almost my entire young adult / sentient life.
Sentient life.
Yeah, I've just been super, super into it. And Alex knows, now I've evolved into, like, I've evolved, regressed, and evolved to the point now where I watch bad anime solely for the purpose of making any good anime I watch better, because now you have a relative comparison, right? Like if you're watching 8, 9, 10 out of 10 animes all the time, now the 8 out of 10 feels like your lowest because you've shrunk the range at which you watch anime. But if I watch intentionally these 1 out of 10s, 4 out of 10s, now my range is recalibrated to 10 out of 10 or 0 out of 10 to 10 out of 10, right? And so that's what's been occupying all of my time these days.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I guess for context, Ben goes to med school in New York State.
Yes, New York State, not New York City.
Yeah, I mean, I respect that. I remember joking with you, like, sometimes you gotta appreciate the bad or you gotta experience the bad to appreciate the good. And Ben has really taken that to heart. So, but yeah, do you feel like it has helped you articulate what makes like a good anime or a good show good, and like a mid anime and a mid show mid and a bad, and so forth?
Yeah, I actually do, because a lot of these bad anime, they fall into the isekai category. Isekai, translated from Japanese, means another world. Originally wasn't a genre or subgenre, but it now has become one after the rise of like SAO and all of these sort of like power fantasy type anime where a character gets transported to a different world that is like very different from his, but has a very medieval, almost game-like exterior, and his hidden power, which was pointless in his original world or in the start of this new world, is secretly OP, and he can fuck off beat up all the haters and just, all of this stuff. What I'm starting to understand is all these bad anime, they have no intricacies to their storytelling. It's just good guy beats bad guy purely for the hypeness of it, or because the good guy is like an anti-hero that's edgy and he wants to beat up the bad guys because it makes him feel good, or some nonsensical trope like that. But even non-isekai anime that I consider bad or been assessed by the community to be bad all kind of fall into these same storyline tropes where they're just running the repetitive thing because they know this, whatever it is, will sell. For example, there was a huge boom in anime where a bunch of moe anime, cute girls doing random things, was a very profitable type of show to make. And so they would just pump out a lot of these shows regardless of quality, and you as the viewer can tell the original inspiration, like K-On!, had heart behind it, and then its 50th iteration down the line, it's lost the magic that its originator had. It's so diluted that it doesn't even know what it was trying to parody or like make different. And so that's the biggest thing that I've learned from watching bad media, is why bad media is bad, and it's just cash grabs or a lack of creativity when making the story or anything of that sort. Because when you watch truly unique premises of any things, it reawakens kind of that feeling you've had where you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I came out of the theater or whatever thing so excited. With the prime example being, I recently watched Thunderbolts, and I've been a big Marvel movie guy for a long time, and throughout and all the way up until Endgame, each project I was excited for the next project. It felt like it was tying in to a previous project or a next project, and it would build this overall narrative while each movie felt very real and had some stakes to it. After Endgame, the universe was essentially reset, and from there what you end up having is a bunch of movies that don't feel super related because now you're starting from square one. You have to build up all these new storylines. Nothing's super connected just yet because you don't know where you're headed just about. Thunderbolts was the first time in a long time where I felt like, one, the overall narrative of the MCU was moving forward. Things were interconnected. On top of the fact that the movie came back to a more grounded, humanistic story. And, I mean, it makes sense because you're focusing on all these characters that don't have superpowers. They're just enhanced humans, or they're just normal humans that are skilled at what they do. And so it brings out this very human story about, what do we do in the face of this overwhelming power? If Thor just decided to beat you up as a civilian, how could you even overcome that? And how would you feel about that, right? And so the movie really tackles a lot of themes similar to what I just talked about. Not exactly that, but that really blew my mind. It had me on the verge of tears multiple times, and I was just very blown away. And in the end credit scene, it connected to something else in the MCU, and I was just like, wow, I haven't left the theater after an MCU movie feeling so excited in ages. And I think part of it is because I watched a lot of these bad MCU movies that made me realize I need to see a good MCU movie to reignite that spark.
Yeah, I guess it's you didn't know what you had, right, when you watched the the first three phases, the Infinity Saga, where everything was kind of building up to Thanos, to it turning into kind of directionless, for a little while it seemed they wanted to fight Kang, and then for a little while it seemed they wanted to focus more on the cosmic side of the MCU. But now it seems like things are heading towards a cohesive direction, which is good. I haven't watched Thunderbolts yet, so I'm really just taking his word for it. But I do plan on watching it because I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, I also think that when we're going through these first three phases, we'll get off the Marvel like glaze train soon. But when you go through these first three phases, there's not so many projects that are outright horrible, right? You have some mediocre projects here and there. You have some ones that are, they're outliers. Like Thor 1 and 2 feels like an outlier. The original Hulk, I don't even know if it's canon to the MCU, but it feels like an outlier. All the Iron Man movies were good. Like Thor 3 was good. The first Ant-Man and the Wasp I enjoyed. Spider-Man movies I enjoyed. Just for the most part, most things from the first three phases I can say I've enjoyed. Even if it was mediocre, it still felt like it was adding to this overall narrative as opposed to phase 4 and 5. They just felt so directionless, especially since they start adding in these random Marvel TV shows, which they claim you don't have to watch for these movies, but you actually do. Like key ones here and there, but you do need to watch them. Otherwise, some of the storytelling is lost on you. But that just complicates the whole thing, right?
Yeah. I think what's interesting, though, is I remember when Marvel was kind of at its peak, there was some criticism where, like, it felt like expensive television, right? Like, each year you have 3 movies that come out, and it's basically like a 2-hour long episode, where it seems like you're really just watching it for the Easter egg at the very end that ties it in to the next film. And people felt like those films didn't stand on their own as films, right? But then when, after Infinity Saga, it seemed like there was some direction, like, oh, we want these films to be more independent. But then the criticism became, like, what's the point of there being a shared universe if, like, if the films don't really have anything to do with each other? So do you feel like both of these criticisms were valid, or, like, is there, like, a balance that needs to be struck between?
I think I agree with you that they both are valid. The main issue that I can think of prominently in my head is, I remember after watching Captain Marvel, a lot of people said exactly what you first said, where they're like, this film really has no standing of its own. It's only here purely to introduce Captain Marvel so that she can be an asset to the Avengers to fight Thanos, right?
Yeah.
Inversely, now we go to phase 4 and 5. You have the Eternals, this major shakeup, all these new characters, a major world event happens. And then every project for years afterwards don't even reference the existence of this major world-defining event. And that's the issue with a lot of the phase 4 and 5 movies, is that the stakes have been elevated so much over the course of time that it's hard for them to stay independent because everything is a world-ending threat, right? And so what ends up happening is, I understand that criticism, because how can these events remain independent when they're supposedly world-ending every single time? So, in my view of this, there is a balance that can be struck. Like, for example, with the Thunderbolts, I was such a massive fan that they decided to keep the story, in air quotes, ground level, right? That's what they call, Spider-Man, Daredevil, all those. They're, ground level heroes rather than people that are, changing the cosmos. But it made the story very, very human, because people can relate to, being skilled at martial arts, but you can't beat a gun with martial arts, right? And so I really liked that aspect of the story, but then it still tied in to the rest, because people were waiting for that Easter egg, because it got leaked ahead of time. Everyone was wondering, why is everyone so whatever about this post-credit scene? It's the longest one that's ever existed in MCU. So everyone was wondering what was so big about it. And then when you see the reveal, the Easter egg, you realize why it's so big. And so I think there is a balance that's really, really hard to strike. But I was listening to some in-depth analysis about Thunderbolts last night. And the end credits scene is not directed by the director of Thunderbolts. It's directed by the Russo brothers, who are going to direct Avengers Doomsday. And this was done before with, I forgot which one. It was leading into Infinity War, and it was showing the arrival of Captain Marvel or something. But it was also directed by the Russo brothers, who directed Infinity War and Endgame. And so, to answer your question, I think you have to find that balance, especially with so much media existing in the MCU. You have all these shows that reference all these random things. There's Easter eggs left and right. Back to the Eternals, actually, one of the post-credit scenes, it introduces this character that's supposed to be big. It's a big name actor, and never referenced again. I think the actor himself said that he is not signed up to do anything MCU related, and the MCU's already slated out till the end of phase whatever. And so I think the pointlessness of a lot of these Easter eggs weighed on the fans, on top of the fact that everything, they're trying to make the movies more independent, but still the movies weren't that good, even if you take out the Easter egg at the end, right? So I think the way to get back to all of this and right all the fan criticism is you have to have a mix of these really grounded, humane stories like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and Thunderbolts, but also your big world, like Doctor Strange type movies, right? And you need to mix them in well and then have the shows supplement them without them being required reading.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely sounds tough, but yeah, I think it makes sense that you want to have a good mix of, ground level stories where like the characters, kind of have a life of their own. They can kind of breathe on their own, whilst kind of sprinkling in like the big events, like the world ending ramification events, right? To kind of build up and make it something bigger. But if you just have one or the other, then, eventually it starts to feel the same.
Yeah. I think a good reference point, maybe it's because we're Asian, but I loved Shang-Chi when it came out. And it was like an independent event because it literally happened in a completely separate dimension. So there was no overlap with the rest of the world. And so I was like, okay, maybe if you do it like that, I'll like it a little bit more.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense too. And then I think at the time, Shang-Chi was received well. Like, because I think at that point, like, Marvel had kind of hit a rut, right? With its films. Or the TV shows too. I think the TV shows are kind of what kind of shattered the magic of the MCU. Where people are like, this show is kind of questionable in quality, and then it kind of split over to the movies. But yeah, at the time, Shang-Chi was received well. And then we haven't heard anything about Shang-Chi for like 4 years, right? I think we just recently found out that Shang-Chi is going to be in like Avengers Doomsday. But other than that, it was kind of like, oh, like is Shang-Chi 2 coming out? Like what's happening, right? So yeah, I think, it's good to have that balance where, the character can stand on its own. But at the end of the day, it's like, we're not making independent films for these stories. Like it's all building up to something greater.
Yeah, I think that's also, I remember I watched or I didn't watch, I read it, a press conference about the Marvel TV shows and how they're not going to make anything they're going to try to limit the amount of season 2s because they want it to add to this greater narrative. Because I think this came out after Moon Knight ended, and Moon Knight was very well received, and a lot of fans wanted a Moon Knight season 2, but they wanted Moon Knight to be more integrated into the overall MCU. So they were like, nah, no season 2. Actually, we're going to put him in some random movie. Again, have not heard about anything in that realm since,
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, hopefully Marvel's back on track. I think superhero films are like great events, right? Great. So I remember like in the Infinity Saga, like each movie, each year came out, like you kind of gathered all your friends together. And, and then you would watch, the Avengers film or, even the Spider-Man film together. So it was a good, social time. I think it's something the theaters, kind of miss, right? As we talk about how the theaters are kind of declined, especially post-COVID, where people only really want to come out for certain films. So I think it'll be good for the Marvel films to come back a bit. I'm also excited for the Superman film coming out.
Oh, yeah.
I think it would be good for DC to also step up its game. I know there's a little, not a little bit. There's a big rivalry going on between Marvel and DC. But in my opinion, hey, if both are good, that's more good movies for all of us to watch. So, but I'm excited for Superman because Superman is such a big cultural icon. Like we talk about, he's like the prototypical superhero, right? Like every parody of a superhero is based off of Superman, right? Like One Punch Man in anime, Superman kind of parody. We got, if they're deconstructing a superhero, like the Boys, evil
Homelander.
Superman is basically, that's Homelander basically. Omni-Man from Invincible is evil Superman, basically.
Sentry from Thunderbolts is like conflicted Superman.
Okay, yeah. So basically, yeah, I know a lot of people find Superman as a boring character because he's too perfect, but I think there's ways to do the character well, right? Because I think that he's very human, even though he is an alien, like a seemingly perfect alien, right? Like he cares a lot about why he's doing stuff. He cares a lot about people, and hopefully the film can express that. But yeah, I think we're in for a good summer of films potentially.
Yeah, there's also like that drama between like Marvel Studios, James Gunn getting removed, getting poached over to DC, still directing Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot of the actors are like, I don't want to return unless James Gunn returns. That whole thing is baked into this as well. But I just want both to succeed because if they both put out good films, it will motivate both studios to continue putting out good films. Otherwise, the one studio will feel like they have a leg up on the other,
Yeah, and I think ultimately at the end of the day, like competition, is what makes the product thrive, right? Like if you're kind of like resting on your heels, like you kind of take your audience for granted. I mean that may have been kind of what happened with Marvel, right? Like they didn't really feel like once they like reached their goal of like, hey, we built up the ultimate team up movie. Like what's next, right? So I think it'll be good. But I think speaking of competition, something like we're really into, like we really like follow a lot of sports, right? And I think sports is like inherent competition where like you need, I feel like you kind of need like two great forces, two great rivalries in the sport for it to thrive, right? Like let's take like the NBA for example. Like, the NBA really blew up because of Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson, right? The Celtics versus the Lakers. Like, before that, like, the NBA viewership wasn't doing too well. Like, they weren't even sure if they were going to exist in the next couple of years, right? But once they had, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, like, they had, like, the rivalry going back into college. So, David Stern, the commissioner, he knew that he could market that. And, the NBA really blew up in the 80s, right? And they were able to capitalize that in the 90s with, like, Michael Jordan, where they're kind of being like, oh, you're watching, like, the spectacle, like, the peak of the sport, right? And I feel like that's kind of what the NBA kind of struggles with right now is I think they haven't really found, like, a good rivalry to replace it, right? Like, they basically had LeBron versus the Warriors in, like, the 2010s. But I think as of right now, like, I think as much as fans like to say like they love parity, like they love it when different teams win each year, I think with the NBA specifically, like it's so player dependent that like I think people naturally gravitate they're tribalistic, right? They want to pick a side to root for, and I think because there's so much competitive turnover, that fans haven't really been able to be attached to a certain team, and I think the product might be suffering because of that.
Yeah, at the onset of this NBA season, a lot of reports were coming about tanking viewership, just less interest. I mean, the game has changed, right? So that's definitely playing into it, shooting a lot more free throws, a lot more timeouts, a lot more breaks in the action, right? And so I think that plays into it. A lot of people were like, should we change the amount of threes that are being taken, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But the end result is that viewership is tanking. And I think all of these factors rolled into one is the cause of this, right?
Yeah.
Something that I'm really interested to slightly pivot, we'll come back to the NBA, but is the UFC. UFC is having the exact same problem. They don't release the pay-per-view numbers anymore. They used to all the time when Conor McGregor was fighting, Khabib was, headlining all of these fights. Because Conor McGregor is similar to the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. He was the peak of the sport. The highest viewership ever for the UFC is all Conor McGregor events. Regardless of what you feel about him, the sport was at its best when Conor McGregor was at his best, because now you're generating interest. You have people that want to learn MMA because of Conor McGregor. He's not just a striker. Like, you see him counter wrestling Khabib and you're like, whoa, he has a chance to beat this guy. There's so many reasons why the height of Conor McGregor was colloquially like the height of the UFC. Nowadays, I love watching it because there's so much parity in the sport. But I'm what you'd consider a hardcore fan. Like, it doesn't appeal as much to like your casual fan that just got into it, maybe at the sports bar looking at multiple screens. Like, why should I watch UFC over NBA, right?
Yeah. So I think that's kind of a tension that exists in a lot of sports where like what the casual wants and what the hardcore fan wants are two different things, right? It's like kind of back to the NBA. I think on paper, like, I think we haven't had a back-to-back champion since the Warriors 2017 and 2018. Like 2019 was the Raptors, 2020 was the Lakers, 2021 was the Bucks, 22, I don't even remember, 23 was Denver, 24 was the Celtics. Oh, 2022 was the Warriors again. So basically, we haven't had a back-to-back champion. We haven't really had like a dynasty, quote unquote, since like the Warriors, right? And you would think that the number one thing people say is we hate super teams. Right? When KD went to the Warriors, people like he's ruined the game. Like, I don't even want to watch basketball anymore if you know the end result, right? But the viewership during those seasons were actually at its peak, right? And part of it was because you wanted to watch LeBron like potentially, take down the super team, right? Like, people really love the underdog story. Like, they really love, the idea that like, hey, despite these extenuating circumstances, like my team might be, shorthanded. As long as they put in more effort and as long as they care more, like they can pull it off, right? Like, it's about Jimmy and Joe's and not X's and O's. So, despite all that, like viewership has actually gone down since then, right? And I think that's like a tension, probably for the commissioner and for the league is like, what do they want to market to, right? Because in the day, like, if as much as the hardcore fan might complain about, like, we hate super teams, we don't like this and that, like, they're still going to watch regardless, right? Because they like basketball, they like the sport too much. But, yeah, I just think, there's also a lot of reasons why the NBA may not be doing well, but in my opinion, I think the primary reason is, there aren't, like, two forces, basically, for people to like gravitate towards, people to like love or to hate on.
What do you think about how the NBA playoffs is shaping up this season? Because everyone's written off the Celtics as coming out of the East, which might not necessarily be true. Like, I think when playoff starts, everything gets a lot harder. Random upsets can happen. Like, look at the Heat from the previous handful of years coming out as the 8th seed. But the West is wide open. Anyone can come out. What do you think?
Yeah. It's tough because, I'm a Mavs fan, and when they traded Luka, that like, I kind of may have an existential crisis on, what is my relationship with the sport as a fan, it's like, why should I care so much, that this, like, why do I have a parasocial relationship with this player, right? That I care enough that, when he left, like, I was actually sad in my personal life for like a couple of days, but, yeah, I think OKC is the favorite on paper, right? Because they won like 68 games. They have a pretty deep team. They have the probable MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So they're the favorites on paper. But I think the knock on them as to why people, might feel like some other teams might come out is that, they're still a very young team. Like, last year was their first year in the playoffs. So this is their second year in the playoffs. So people are like, okay, they might get knocked out again. But I think the biggest thing is that, who's going to, like, step up to, like, overtake them, right? Like, last year it was the Mavs, right? The Mavs, like, the Thunder, they were, like, a pretty small team last year. So, like, they didn't really have a true big or true center. And the Mavs, they had, like, a really deep center rotation. So we basically just, like, out-rebounded them, beat the shit out of them, basically. And, yeah, we, like, won it in 6, and it was amazing. But this year, Nico, like, blew up the Mavs because, he's a bitch, and he hates Luka. So,
The Mavs fandom is coming out, clearly.
Yeah, I really thought that would be us, but now I don't know. But I think Denver could match up pretty well against the Thunder because, they got Jokic. He's, like, a pretty unstoppable center, and he poses a lot of problems for defenses in general. Of course, he poses a lot of problems for his own team's defense as well. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, there's as of today, as of tonight, they'll be playing the Clippers in Game 7. So we'll see how that goes.
What do you think about? Okay, so as of today, Cavs and Pacers are set to match up in the East, and Knicks and Celtics. What do you think?
Yeah, so Cavs and Pacers, I think Cavs had such a good record that everyone's probably assuming the Cavs will win handily, and they're definitely my favorites in the series. But the Pacers are a sneaky good team. Like they play really fast, which means that they can cut any deficit really quick because they shoot a lot of threes. They score pretty early in the shot clock. It also means that they can blow a lot of leads too, because when they at the end of the games when they should be killing the clock, they're not, and that's what happened against the Celtics last year. So, worst case, I can see it being a sweep for the Cavs, but I think it will be close every game regardless. But yeah, I think the Pacers are like kind of the epitome of modern basketball. Like they're very switchable. Like they can run like a 5-out, which means like everyone can shoot threes, so like you can space out every player on the perimeter. So I have a pretty good. I think the series will be entertaining to watch at the very least. But I think at the end of the day, if it's a sweep, like people are only going to care about the end result rather than how the game actually went. And then for the Knicks and Celtics, I don't believe in the Knicks at all. They had a terrible record against the top seeds, I think, or the top teams in the league. I think that they played pretty close to their ceiling in the regular season, right? And even every game against the Pistons, like it was pretty close. So, yeah, I'm hammering that Celtics line for sure. But yeah, I think part of it too is I think Dibs is a very rigid coach, and I mean I think they're actually pretty healthy this season. But Dibs is kind of known for like running his players into the ground, so they might be like exhausted by playoff start. But yeah, so I'm expecting Celtics to advance. I think boring pick is Celtics, Cavs, but I think Pacers are a dark horse for sure.
But if the Knicks did win, New York City would blow up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It would literally implode.
I mean, because the Knicks are good right now, like New York City is buzzing, right? Like,
yeah.
Like I've seen the videos of
last year's playoffs.
Yeah, I've also I don't remember what the YouTube channel is called, but it's like whenever like the Knicks win, the Knicks win, the fans kind of like go crazy in the streets, and then like they're like interviewing the fans. Like it's pretty lit, and it's like it feels very grassroots. So I mean, I would love to see it as a neutral, because I'm all for those type of shenanigans, but I just don't think it's gonna happen.
I just remember watching on TikTok last year, and it's like all these people just like gathered outside of MSG and like Times Square. They're like, "Fuck Trae Young," and it's just like Trae Young's not even in the fucking playoffs.
Oh yeah, it's because he traumatized them like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But it's funny. And also, as a Mavs fan, y'all are welcome for Brunson. We developed him, we gave him away for nothing.
The Mavs are doing that a lot.
Yeah,
these days.
the Mavs apparently we're the farm team for the rest of the league. So I don't know. Even if we somehow land like Cooper Flag, the top prospect in this draft, we're probably giving up to the Celtics in like 5 years or something because he's white. Yeah, sorry, Nico. All right, we're venturing off into dangerous territory, but I think for the last matchup,
what do you think about Nuggets, Clippers, and Warriors, Rockets?
I mean, I already said, well, Nuggets, Clippers. Yeah, I don't know. It could honestly go either way. I mean, fourth seed versus fifth seed. Each game has been relatively close. So I think I want the Nuggets to win because I think they match. It would be more entertaining to watch against the Thunder. But I mean, I think they Harden, still one of the greatest offensive players of all time. So I think, Clippers Thunder should be good too. But yeah, that's a coin flip in my eyes. And then Rockets Warriors. Well, I thought the Warriors were gonna win by now, but
dude, I'm so mad.
they might blow another 3-1 lead.
They even have playoff Jimmy too. He's going crazy these playoffs.
I mean, he played well last game too.
He played well all the games that he's played.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, the Rockets have all the momentum right now, right? There's a lot of pressure. But
pressure makes diamonds, bro.
Yeah, I'm still going to pick the Warriors for Game 7. They're at home. Oh, they're not home.
No, they're at Houston.
They're at Houston. So I'm still going to pick the Warriors just because, I respect Steph. I respect Jimmy. Jimmy buckets. So, yeah. Sorry for our audience who's probably like, why are these guys just not giving any like statistical like analysis on as to why who? Because I'm not a pro, but just my gut feeling. I saw the video of Steph going up to his son after the game, and the son like didn't even want to look at Steph because he was so disappointed. I think that'll light a fire under Steph.
Dude, Jimmy Butler has aura about taking these 7-8 seed teams deep into the playoffs. He's got to cash that in again.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, ultimately, it's a close series, right? So I think the mistake was that Steve Kerr, like, he got kind of cocky game 5 basically, right? Like they were getting blown out, and he like took out his starters in the third quarter, and then the bench got it within like 14. Yeah, I think that kind of like sets the tone basically, right? Because you're basically like, oh, I think we can win Game 6 for sure, but then that's not quite what happened. But yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting narratives in that game because the Warriors kind of set the small ball craze for the past decade, right? Like once they put Draymond as a center in the starting lineup, like it became like their death lineup, and everyone's like, oh, we gotta find like a switchable center who can guard like 1 to 5 and can shoot threes to like space out our offense. But like those players are super rare, right? So I think a lot of teams, they tried finding this formula that they couldn't like capture. But then, the Rockets, they basically played, a double big lineup with like Steven Adams and Sengun basically. So, and right now it seems like they're basically dominating the Warriors like physically, and they're getting a lot of rebounds. So even when the Warriors get stops, the Rockets have like second possession, second chances. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a literal end of an era. Like the Warriors kind of beat the traditional lineup, but they got ended by another traditional lineup. But at the end of the day, we're all just fans, so we'll see. A lot of times, a lot of narratives seem to come out a certain way, and they end really quick because the team decides otherwise. But I think as a homer, homer's not the right word because I'm not a Warriors fan, but as a Houston hater, I'm going for the Warriors.
For context for me, I never watched basketball until the Warriors dynasty because I just could not stand like your classic like James Harden ISO ball. I gotta just play very slow and just do it all myself type of basketball. I hated watching that because I'm a big believer in if you have a team, you use your team. Otherwise, it's just a 1v1 sport, right? Coming from tennis, like I always had wanted to play a team sport, and so when I saw the Warriors and how much passing they were doing and how much aura they had with like incorporating all 5 people on the court into this one sort of unit that could slam through other teams. That's what sold me, and that's why I've been a Warriors fan despite having no connection to California or the Bay.
Yeah, this guy's from Dallas. Yeah, he's a Warriors fan. But his story is not uncommon. But yeah, honestly, I don't even like the Warriors because I don't know. I think I guess honestly I'm kind of a contrarian at heart, right? Like I don't think there's a right way to play basketball. At the end of the day, you win, right? And you gotta do what you gotta do. And I honestly I like that there's diversity in play styles, right? And I think the worst thing that I see in a lot of sports, like this applies to soccer too, is that when you see a dominant team, everyone tries to replicate the formula, right? But I think what a lot of people don't realize is sometimes there's just a lot of unique circumstances that come across that allow these super teams to form, right? And you can't exactly replicate their roster philosophy or their playing philosophy, right? So yeah, I think the Warriors, it's very equitable. There's a lot of ball movement, there's a lot of cutting, off-ball movement as well. So even players who are seemingly less talented, they have opportunities to shine because of the system, right? And it still takes a great player like Steph, who's basically running around, drawing in defenses and creating, space whenever the defenders move to follow Steph. Like, it still takes like great players to do that, right? But yeah, I think I'm biased because Luka plays very similar to Harden, and Luka gets a lot of hate because he plays in a very ISO heavy way. But I think in a way it's like when Harden and Luka are on, I think it's very beautiful to watch because you're basically watching a guy like a one-man show basically, and in a way they're still elevating like these role players who are very hyper focused, right? Like they can play defense and they can shoot threes, but like they can't like really dribble well, or they can't really create on their own. But because they're attracting so much attention, they're making it easier for the role players to do it, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's like there's different ways to win, basically, right? And I think when we get into the mindset of like, the Warriors way is the right way, or the kind of what Nico basically got on was like defense wins championships, like Mamba mentality. Like when we get into that way, like I think in my opinion that kind of ruins the game because you're pigeonholing, you're not letting certain players shine, right? So yeah, it's tough. But I see that in soccer too, right? With there's this coach called Pep Guardiola. He coached Barcelona and Man City, and basically all his teams they win a ton of games. Like they win, they basically are really dominant in like the league, and then they attract all the best players, right? And a lot of people criticize his play style as very methodical. Like they don't really let individual talents shine. So there's a lot of different positions in soccer, but like one thing is like there used to be basically in the 2000s. I mean, this is like I was kind of too young to really watch that era, but from what I've seen is like there's a lot of individual flair, right? You see a lot of people do like nutmegs and like little flicks and like basically a lot of stupid stuff that's probably not efficient, but it's like entertaining to watch, right?
They're egoists, dude.
They're egoists, yeah. But basically, he could basically cut that shit out. So then basically for a lot of like wingers, basically it kind of seems like, you pass the ball and then you pass it back and don't create an opportunity, or you're basically passing sideways a lot, right? And I think in like modern philosophy, it's like, you're basically trying to, draw the defenders away and create like an opening, right? But to the average fan, like we're like, I mean, we're noobs, so like, we're not in the room to like understand these tactics. So it just looks like you're too scared to pass the ball forward, right? So I think for a lot of fans, like they want to see more risk because, like, yeah, when you create risk, it looks bad when you turn the ball over and there's like counterattack. But it also looks really great when like you create like that perfect pass that like the attacker like has this perfect run and he like scores a great goal, right? But like I think the criticism in soccer basically is that coach, because he was so dominant a lot, and his philosophy is like it's seen as like taking away a lot of individual flair. A lot of other teams have tried mimicking that, and a lot of fans feel like that has ruined the game. Like you're not really seeing as much creativity anymore.
Dude, maybe they do need to start blue lock in real life and make a team all strikers.
Yeah, screw defense. It's all about. Hey, at the end of the day, the team that wins is the team that scores more goals than the other team.
That's literally the blue lock philosophy. That's why they made their goalie striker.
Yeah. I'm just saying, sometimes life imitates art. So,
yeah. What is it to be a system player versus like an ego player?
Yeah.
That's a conversation for another day, but I think it is not incorrect to be either.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like, it's kind of like life in general too, but there's like kind of like a beautiful tension when you have like these two contradictory forces like fighting for what is their style of winning. And, for some of these like players and coaches, like it gets really deep for them where they're like, it's kind of like their life philosophy, right? But yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess like when everyone, it's like, but kind of back to the NBA, it's like everyone's like, oh, I feel like the sport's so boring because everyone shoots threes and scores layups and like flops a lot, right? Like I want to see more mid range or more post game, more diversity and like moves. And that may or may not be true. I have mixed feelings on that. But at the end of the day, it's like I think people like watching different styles, because at the end of the day, like sports is like entertainment, right? Like I like, this is my hot take that has not really been received positively, but sports are like, it's like reality TV for men. Like everyone, like if you think about it, you're not really in control of what's going on. You're watching a bunch of guys duke it out on the field, and you're basically projecting all your hopes and dreams onto these groups of guys to win it for you. And sometimes the teams represent something more than what it literally. I mean, literally at the end of the day, like all this stuff is like a kid's game, right? Like basketball, soccer, football, maybe not UFC. But at the end of the day, they're all just games, right? But at the end of the day, people attach meaning to it because they see themselves in the game, right? Maybe it's something deeper, like, oh, I really like how team basketball is more equitable, or maybe they're like, hey, this team is from Dallas and I'm from Dallas, and when they win, I win. The existential state of my soul depends on this team. That's a little questionable, but at the end of the day, like, it all means something to them, right? And I think that's like where the beauty lies. Like sometimes you put a lot of frivolous attachment and attention into seemingly unnecessary things, but they can create like really great experiences.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that, like at the core of all of these sports, whether you win or you lose, there's no additional meaning beyond that, right? Like you either won or you lost. You won the money from winning the championship or you didn't, right? There's only one winner because there's a whole tournament bracket. But it's people who are watching these things, the commentators, the analysts, like Stephen A., like those type of people, they're the ones who are attaching additional meaning to these outcomes.
Yeah, like how does this affect LeBron's legacy? Like, it's like a meme because like it's really stupid. But at the end of the day, it's like, like even for such a game, something like a game, it's like this guy's an entertainer, right? And his legacy is like, what did he mean to the fans, right? And I think it's kind of cool that we get to have the shared experience that we get to bond over, like watching these games together, right? Like, and kind of going back to the Luka trade, like if we had never won the championship, I wouldn't have felt that having Luka on our team was a waste of time, because honestly, in the day, I think being in contention is like what's the most fun, right? Not just winning the championship. And like I remember when post 2011 championship when the Mavs were like incredibly mediocre, like it didn't really seem like they had a future. We had nothing really to play for because we had no direction, right? And when we got Luka and like, at the end of the day, like we got like a top 3 player, potentially in the league. It felt like there was something to bond over and to watch around, right? Like, I had a ton of fun watching the playoffs, like the last couple of seasons, with my friends, and it felt like that was like taken away because we lost in the finals, right? At the end of the day, like we made it to the finals, right? Like it's not I don't understand the mindset of like, oh, just because you made it to the finals is somehow worse than like losing in the first round, right? But you hear that from like people who are like, Jordan's better than LeBron because Jordan's 6-0 in the finals, while LeBron is, I don't know, had lost in the finals a couple of times. And I'm not trying to make an argument for who's a GOAT or not, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about the journey, right? At the end of the day, it's like, sports is entertainment, right? Like they're just trying to provide something for the fans to, bond over and, have fun watching. Like it's not that deep and it is that deep at the same time.
That's the perfect summation of all of this. And so that concludes kind of our return episode. It's been great to get back into, the driver's seat and do this all again. How do you feel getting back into all this? Because I don't actually feel that rusty. I feel quite good. I feel maybe like 70% of what we were at our peak.
Yeah, I think I grew into it. I think there's some parts where I was rusty, or I think articulation could be better, direction could be better, but I think in terms of like recording, like it was good. Like I was pretty tired before this podcast. Like I had wasted a lot of last night playing this gotcha game. But I feel like during this podcast, like I got energized. Like not as tired anymore. And that was kind of like a worry of mine. Like before we were recording, I was like, bro, what if I can't even like string words together because I stayed up late like a college kid. But I think it's good. I'm looking forward to doing this again. I mean, it's always good to just like revisit topics that we enjoy talking about. And I think the good thing about a podcast is we can just talk about whatever, right? Like I think our show has always been kind of like a talk show style podcast where we're just trying to create good and genuine conversations, and yeah, I know podcasts have changed somewhat since we first started, where I think a lot of podcasters like specific topics. I think there's a lot of expectation that you're like an expert, and I think it's at the end of the day, like we're just trying to create good conversations, and obviously we're as long as we don't spread misinformation, I think the podcast is a good avenue for that.
Yeah, and next time we're gonna be back with a guest, so you won't have to just listen to us purely drone on about random things. But thank you for listening. Welcome back to the show, and we're gonna try to be consistent again.
Yeah. So you will see us again, and hopefully the next time you hear us, we're not talking about how our life has changed in the last 5 years. But yeah, time to do our tagline, which we haven't done in a super long time. But I believe it was, we're not experts.
We're nuanced nonsense.
No, we're not experts. We just like talking. All right, we'll be better. Okay, we'll get that. We'll get the hammer down. But,
yeah.
We'll see ya.
All right. Bye.